Hello, I'm Roger Baker, Executive Director of the Stratfor Center for Applied Geopolitics at RANE. This podcast is brought to you by RANE Worldview, the premier digital publication for objective geopolitical intelligence and analysis. Find out how RANE can help you stay ahead of global events at ranenetwork.com.
This is the Essential Geopolitics podcast from RANE. I'm Emily Donahue. Welcome. Let's talk about the geopolitics of Taiwan and its position as a central point in the great power competition between the U.S. and China, and its role as a bellwether for China's ambitions in the Pacific. I know, that's a lot to manage. So, for guidance, I asked Chase Blazek to join us. He's Asia-Pacific analyst with RANE. Chase, it is great to have you back on the podcast.
Great to be here again, Emily.
Can you tell me how activities around Taiwan changed in the short term since U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited in early August?
Yeah, it was certainly an unexpected development that has changed the status quo of both U.S.-China and Taiwan-China relations, and in general, the world's relations with China, because this was an instance where an individual's decisions drove geopolitics when normally it is pragmatism. It is, Washington-Beijing relations. It is military developments that drive this relationship in a very regimented and intentional way. But in this case, it was one congressperson who wanted to go, and she did go, and China responded accordingly with the biggest military drills we've seen in a quarter century. Live fire of missiles and artillery into the waters around Taiwan, incursions via aircraft and naval vessels all around Taiwan. And that seems to be, it's still in the recent past, so we can't say for sure, but it seems to be where we're ironing out at this new status quo is whenever someone visits Taiwan or does something that China doesn't like, it is we will fly planes here or there. We will cross the Taiwan Strait median line, which China didn't used to do. We will send ships around Taiwan's northeastern and southeastern coasts, which is a little bit more normal. But these sorts of military, I wouldn't say threats, they're kind of threats, but military shows of force are what we can expect to see in the future going forward here, which, like I said, is somewhat new. And we are seeing the U.S. still planning to do freedom of navigation operations through the Taiwan Strait, to which we can expect China to respond similarly. And all of this risks these sorts of at-sea and in-the-air collisions as China's fielding planes, Taiwan is trying to ward them off, the U.S. is sailing through, China's trying to ward them off. The more these folks are going in and out, the more we have the risks of these small crises popping up.
Chase, a lot of this escalation is more than just Nancy Pelosi, am I correct? I mean, part of this is Chinese leadership saying that time is coming close for China to reclaim Taiwan or to assert its influence there.
Right, 100%. This is not just Nancy Pelosi. A lot of this is political too. It's a very sensitive year for China. They're going to be holding their 20th Party Congress, which is a once every 5-year development. Xi Jinping is going to be getting his relatively unprecedented third term as the leader of China, the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, to be exact. And so ahead of all of that, Beijing feels the need to respond strongly to perceived threats to China's sovereignty. So when Nancy Pelosi does something like this, China is also responding particularly heavily right now. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of talk about what this means for China's plans for Taiwan. Me and my colleagues, we're of the camp that we don't believe what's happened in Ukraine, what's happened because of Pelosi, is really changing China's long-term calculus on Taiwan and invasion and all of that, all the details attached with that. But it is a particularly politically sensitive time in China, as well as the U.S. The November midterms are coming up, so both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in the U.S. are going to compete with each other to see who can be more anti-China or pro-Taiwan. They're sort of one and the same these days. And so visits like this also have a domestic purpose in the United States to further people's own, either their party's ambitions or their personal ambitions. So there's a lot of other stuff on the periphery of these issues that's influencing what are normally very high level, very military to military, government to government decisions.
Should we be looking at further Taiwan developments that could happen this fall?
Yeah, there's a few. We've seen in the wake of the Pelosi visit, there was another visit of congresspersons, and then yet another this earlier this week, as well as a Japanese delegation of lawmakers that went to Taiwan. So those sorts of things, China's going to respond in kind, like they have with military flights across the Taiwan Strait, median line, things like that. And there's a German delegation expected in October and a British delegation expected in November, I believe, to visit Taiwan as well. So this is becoming, it has been a pattern in the past, but it seems these things are accelerating in their pace. So those are sort of some smaller developments, but we can expect pretty normal tit for tat like we've seen in the last month from China for those. Otherwise, we're also going to see the Taiwan local elections this November, which could see the ruling DPP in Taiwan, which is the more anti-China party of the two. We could see them win a bunch of seats because the last time China threatened Taiwan with missiles and artillery, it did not go the direction China wanted it to in Taiwanese politics. Instead of scaring the Taiwanese, it pushed them to vote for more pro-independence individuals in office. So we could expect something similar this November, and if that does happen with the DPP winning many seats in local elections, China could similarly respond with more of these sorts of offhand trade measures we've seen, blocking agricultural exports, getting more custom scrutiny, those kinds of things that aren't going to hurt the economies of China, Taiwan, or the US on a large scale, but are meant to target very tailored political constituencies and send a message. On the other hand, we're also expecting after Xi Jinping gets his third term at the 20th Party Congress, Beijing will feel a little bit more secure and will have less of a need for this bluster and show of force. To be clear, Taiwan is still it's a critical issue to China. So just because Xi gets his third term doesn't mean they say, oh, it's no big deal, you can go to Taiwan anytime you want, US legislators. But it does mean that the very acute political motivation for being seen to be strong in the face of US actions toward Taiwan is a little bit lessened after this November.
Well, what about the future of China and Taiwan relations?
Yeah, like I was sort of hinting at earlier, we're not expecting much of what's happened recently in Ukraine or from Nancy Pelosi's visit to really affect the long-term trajectory of Taiwan-China relations, meaning China's willingness to impose concerted economic and military campaigns on Taiwan, or even an invasion. We don't expect any of this has sort of accelerated that timeline. We have seen the tools escalate a little bit, right? China more willing to use these military tools in a way they haven't before, but nonetheless, the timeline for that big question of invasion really hasn't changed too much. But what we are going to be watching for is more of these punctuated, politically fraught events, right? Like the Pelosi visit, like other lawmakers' visits, like moves by the Taiwanese pro-independence wing of the ruling party. All of these things, nationalists in China pushing the government to do something about Taiwan, all of these are particular events that, though all three parties, China, Taiwan, and the United States, don't want to push things to conflict, all of these individual smaller political events will continue to punctuate this peace, unsteady peace that we have, and threaten to throw a wrench in the systems of, how Washington, Beijing, and Taipei are planning for cross-strait relations to go versus how they actually play out with some more fraught and more intense events like we've seen in the last couple months happening when these events do pop up.
Chase Blazek is an Asia-Pacific analyst at RANE. Thank you, Chase.
Thank you, Emily.
RANE Worldview is the industry-leading geopolitical intelligence solution. Analysis, interactive graphics, risk trackers, and global threat monitoring are just a few of the functions that you can find in Worldview. Sign up for a trial at ranenetwork.com. That's RANE network.com. I'm Emily Donahue. We'll be back soon.